My name is Zachary Cook, and today I have with me a super, super special guest. I am so excited to talk about everything that this guy's done in music. It is gonna be a loaded one. So pull out your pen and paper, take some notes. We're gonna be here learning. today we have
Yeah,
with today we have with me Mr.
oh,
Jeremiah.
reminiscing.
yes, Mr. Jeremiah Soto from Solace. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate you contacting me.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I cannot believe you actually agreed to my crazy little stupid podcast here. But man, I've seen a lot of things with podcasts and musicians and engineers, and they never really want to ask the questions that I want to hear. So since I'm a big fan
Hmm,
of your music, and I know there's things that I've been thinking for years now about your music, I have got a set of questions set aside here, and I've got to know. And I think the people would like to know too. And if you guys are listening in, be sure to check out the links. We have those down below. A Solace playlist that I personally curated of some of my personal favorite ones that you might like as well. But you can find them on Spotify and wherever music is available. Solace. It's great to have it on the background, kind of low while you're listening to this as well, because the music isn't too jarring, but it is very thoughtful music. So I will say, take some time and listen to it with some headphones and relax your troubles away. That's the kind of music it really
it's
is.
it's moody,
Very, very moody. Very, very moody. But it's at
like
a
me.
no, no, no. If that's the case, you make some of the moodiest, greatest music I think I've personally ever laid my ears on. And I've listened to a lot of music. So for those that know me, obviously, I went to sound engineering school and I grew up as a musician. So I really like to listen to a lot of stuff and try a lot of things, like food, but with music. Um,
There you
and
go.
I came across your song that we were talking before we got started with this. That I came across a song of yours at a tea shop of all places. It was they sold loose leaf tea there, nothing else, and some probiotics and stuff like that. And they had it on in the background. So I was like, what is going on in this music? I was so confused by what I was hearing, but impressed. I was just like, I've never heard anything like this before. So I pulled out my Shazam and I hit the song, and this guy comes up. and the rest is history, as they say, because I went into the deep end on the music that you have put out over the last 20 so odd years. And starting with, I guess, your first album would go back to the Gathering season. Is that correct?
Uh, my first album I released was in 1995. It was called Rhythm of the Dance, and it was kind of like a rhythm study of Arabic rhythms.
Okay. Gotcha. And what was your aim going into that kind of music? So like you have a background as being a drummer and you went to learn percussion professionally yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, I kind of started out as a keyboard player. Actually, I started out as a keyboard player,
Interesting.
um, and worked with several friends of mine in various bands, um, from goth music to like Dead Can Dance style music. And I think the Dead Can Dance style, the moodiness and the rhythms that they use kind of stuck with me the most. And so I kind of went more in that direction. But they kind of mix the Renaissance, medieval, Middle Eastern sensibilities together, and I went all the way Middle Eastern and learned percussion, learned polyrhythm, African polyrhythm, Persian, soft Persian style frame drum technique. Um, yeah, and then later on, a few years later, I went into more classical Arabic style. I learned from my teacher Suhail Kaspar. But I was kind of wanting to hear what I wanted to hear from Arabic music, and particularly belly dance music. And I wanted to hear more orchestrated, more rhythmic, heavily rhythmic, odd time meters, arrangement changes, dynamic. I wanted to hear more of that in a more modern sense. So it's kind of like people called me the Americanized, like tribal belly dance musician. So that's kind of like what I was kind of put into that category.
It's all that and more, honestly. I mean, because
Yeah.
here's the thing: when I started listening to it, I mean, similar thing. I always looked for like Eastern music because there's something about like the Dorian mode or all these other modes that are very Eastern sounding, and you get into like, that sounds very Eastern, minor. And I heard a song by Yngwie Malmsteen called Pyramid of uh, Chips or Chops, I think, of Egypt. And it has a very, very Eastern sound. So it's, do, 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 cha, do, 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 cha on the drums, but then the
Yeah.
guitars come in and it's the same thing. And I'm like, man, I like that. But again, it's Yngwie Malmsteen, so it's, shred, shred, shred. And you kind of get lost in that for a minute. And then it's like, back to normal with the music. Yours really focuses on the music. And what I respect about what you do in your music is that you really put the thought into what you're creating, because like you said, you really want to go into these other, areas. You want to make it more, rhythmic. You want to make it sound with more strings and odd time signatures and change things up. And other Eastern music I've heard, it's start to finish, it's the same thing. You'll have a droning sitar over top, a tabla down under, and some, darbuka over top, and that's the whole song. And then it might change in the next one, and that's it. I think it's like that for the first minute of each of your songs, and then it goes crazy. It in the best possible way. I'm not trying to turn people away by thinking, "Oh, this music is crazy." No, 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 no. It is like an explosion of.
Crazy world.
It's an explosion of flavor for your ears. I had
Yeah.
just never seen. Sorry, excuse me. I never heard somebody put so many things into a song and have it work. Like how many drums would you say you put into an average song?
Oh, it's probably be I try to have I try to have all dynamic ranges covered, bass, medium, high end. I try to cover all of those. Um, I mean, lately I've been working on drum music, and I have like been laying down 20 tracks of drums, layering and layering. So I'm working on new material that's very heavily percussive. Back then, it was, I would utilize samples, I would utilize recorded drums, and most of the time I tried to cover all the basic frequencies to low, medium, high. And so sometimes 5 to 6 drums.
Wow, that's pretty darn impressive, I gotta say.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So now it's like now the technique has changed a lot, and the way that I go about making rhythms and recording is completely different than what I did before. So, yeah.
I
But
have.
we can get into that later if you want. It's up to you.
Oh yeah,
You,
for sure.
you
We're gonna
you're
touch.
driving you're driving the car, so
We're gonna touch on a lot of crazy stuff.
oh yeah.
When you got into this music industry, what was the industry like back in the '90s? And like, were you making this music for yourself or for features, or like, what was your driving motivation to make this kind of music? Other than obviously it's music, it's beautiful, but like the world was different back then when it came to recording music. It's not like today. You pull out your laptop, you make a song. How did it go back then?
Yeah. Um I went into the music business to hear music that I wanted to hear, obviously, but I wanted to, oh, let's think about that. I wanted to, I first of all, I always write for myself. First of all, first and foremost, I always write how I feel, how I'm feeling. Um, and what comes out is usually the result, hence the name Solace, because the music is my solace. So that's why I named my project that. And in the beginning, it was easier because you had a physical product. I started my own label, Eventide Music Productions. I would release my own CDs. I even had a few artists on there. And it was easy. You just pack up a couple hundred CDs and you send them off, and the yeah, the atmosphere, the world was much different back then. It was more of like, tried and true, do the walking, get down on the ground, um, rubber hits the road, hit the record stores, advertise, put up flyers, send out postcards as advertisements. It was all about that. And honestly, the money was actually pretty good back then, and so it was. And it just happened that the belly dancing community, I played it for a few friends and they said, hey, the belly dancing community would love this. So I kind of gravitated towards that, and it became a niche market. And I kind of like exploited that niche market and kind of made a name for myself in that realm. So Yeah, it's a lot's changed now though, but so and being a Arabic percussionist too, that also made it more accessible for me to go out there and play on stage and play for dancers and sit in on other people's songs and just play or play with their bands on stage. You know, I didn't have to lug around a big keyboard. I just had my doom bag and I just go up there. It's easy and set up and go, you know. So that's what made it easy for me and fun too at the same time. It was fun and stressful at the same time, but now it's just completely different now.
Yeah. What's your personal favorite drum? You say Doombeck. Is that the one you really gravitate towards?
Yeah, I have a Alexandria mother of pearl. That's my favorite. My newer favorite is a Alexandria Sambate, which is like a medium-sized doumbek. So it's a little bit bigger, and it was made by Diamond Pyramid. A beautiful drum, beautiful inlay. It's so beautiful, and it sounds fantastic. And when I go play with other bands and want the volume and the power, that's the drum I take
Excellent.
with me.
Excellent. I have a couple of Doombecks. They're just cheap little Meinl Doombecks from Guitar Center. I'm trying to really learn it and get better at it. And it's
I have one of those at mine all.
oh nice.
Hey, every drum has its own unique voice to it. So it doesn't really matter how anyone perceives it as good or bad. It's a voice. So sometimes I use really cheap um, frame drums, but it adds to what's already there.
Hmm.
Hence the layering of the
Yes.
drums. There's a little bit of something in that drum, the frequency and sound that adds something to the rest of the drum. So
Yep.
it's not that it's bad or good. It's just a different voice, you know?
I agree. And I have two frame. Well, I have one frame drum and a buffalo drum as well, which is basically a frame drum but with a thicker skin. It has more of a boom, boom, boom feeling to it instead of
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
snappy. And again, frame drum I'm trying to learn. Very difficult. I actually thought it was gonna be easier, but just the size of it and trying to, oh, difficult a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that was the very first technique I learned was Persian. It was a Persian soft Persian, what was it called? Soft Persian style. Basically, it's played. The drum is played on the knee, and your left hand sits, and the left finger hits the edge, and your right hand hits the doom, mute, and edge tone. And that's how I learned. But there's other ways to play it too. There's one of the favorite ways I like playing is a split finger, the Turkish split finger style, which you actually put the frame drum between your legs, and you play it kind of like a tabla, like
Oh,
an
okay.
Indian tabla. So I learned some of that technique from a friend of mine who lives in the Netherlands. His name is Ruben van Rompuy, and he taught me how to play that style. So yeah, so it's the frame drum can be played like 5 different ways.
That's crazy.
you
So,
know,
so it sounds
yeah.
like you've traveled the world, learned just about every drum technique or instrument that you can really get your hands on at this point. So you've got a pretty well versed, you know, collection of ideas and at least abilities within those instruments to pick from when you go to write a song, right?
Absolutely. Every song, I mean, I could take the same frame drum and hold it a different way, and it becomes a different voice. It's different, a little bit different.
Hmm.
There's more, depending if you hold it from the bottom, there's more resonance. If you do soft Persians, it's a little bit more muted. So that's a challenge too. You might have to double mic it. Sometimes the frame drums just have this resonance that, um, comes out, like any different way you hold the drum. So, yeah, the drum can be a frame drum especially can be 5 different drums depending on how you hold it, because however you hold it, it's going to sound different.
Yeah. And I've noticed that too. And, even on the rim of it, the wood, you can knock on it, or, if you add a little bit more reverb, you get like this longer decay of the knock, like, stuff like that
Yeah,
I've played
yeah,
with.
you even
So
yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. You're on the right path. What I was going to say was the name of what I do is called The Sound Experiments. And what it seems to me that I think I gravitated to the most when it came to listening to your music was the fact that you do that. You experiment so much in all of your music. It's almost uncomfortable. It's like, whoa, what is this guy doing? Is he on drugs? Because I can't believe somebody can actually come up with music like this and have it sound so darn good. Because I'll tell you this, the song Exiled, if you're familiar with
Hmm.
the song that you wrote, and put in there.
Yeah.
It drove me
Hmm.
nuts for about 2 weeks to figure out what that sound was in the beginning. And it was the most beautiful sound. And I'm like, wow, what is that? Because there was so much reverb cranked into it. And it took me a while to figure out. I think it's a tabla. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yeah, I think it might just be I might have used a really big fat Turkish drum with a tambourine in the center. I think that might have been. It's been such a long time since I recorded that
It's
song.
okay.
I'm trying, you
But
know.
I think that song just blew my mind the first time I heard that because it actually made me question, the whole thing, the whole song. While I'm listening to it, I'm like, it's a great song, number one. So much beautiful rhythms and stuff that goes everywhere. And then around the 3 minute mark of that song, that comes in again, but it comes in a different way because you've built up this beat the whole way through the song, at least up to that point. So 2 minutes in, you're kind of like, this. I think there's 4 changes I counted within those 2 minutes of just beats. 4 changes in 2 minutes, and then by the time
Mhm.
you get to that 3 minute mark, it's almost like there's like this low end rumble build. I was like, and then it's just like you suck all the sound out of it, and you just leave that tabla again with all the reverbs, like dun dun dun.
Yeah.
People that are listening to what I'm saying right now think I'm crazy, but go listen to the song Exiled and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And when I first heard that, I looked at my wife and I was like, where is he coming up with this? I cannot believe it, because you had literally mastered the art of leading me one place as a listener and then completely like slapping me in a different direction. And it sounded so amazing and beautiful. And you do that all the time in your music, and it has evolved and evolved and evolved and evolved. So my question to you is, when you go in to record this stuff, at what point are you like, all right, let's start getting crazy, let's start experimenting, let's start pushing this, or are you doing that from the get-go? Or what point in the songwriting process of a song do you say, now it's time to turn the wheels off?
um, I kind of always have an idea of what I'm gonna do. Um, that's why it takes me sometimes a long time to write a song because I'll set a basic skeleton of a track
Mm-hmm.
and then record. And during the editing process, that's kind of like when I get crazy. And I'm like, what if I did this here?
Mm.
And I moved this section over here or made a space in between and plopped something totally different here. So it evolves through the creative process of the song. And so it depends on, because when I'm listening back to what I just did, floods of ideas come in, like, okay, now I can try doing this.
Right.
Maybe I should change that. Maybe there needs to be a change here, a time meter. Maybe I should go faster. So there's a lot of stuff going on in my head, and my head is always like, most creative is when I'm editing a lot of the times. And so, because I'm listening to it from the outside looking in instead of being inside this cube, having worried about my time, worried about my technique, worried about how clean I'm sounding, worried about, if I'm peaking. So now that you take me out of that room and put me on the outside looking in, now I can see what I've done. And now I can be like, okay, now let's try this. So that's kind of like how my creative process goes.
Okay. Do you bounce stuff off? Do you bounce stuff off of other drummers or musicians or mixers that you know, or
Mhm.
do you ask your wife, or do you just like, hey, what do you think, or how do you? When do you know like this is like right where it needs to be on a song?
Um, I'll bounce my ideas off my wife. I play her every song. I play her every song that, like, all the newer material I've been writing. I play her every song and ask her what she thinks and everything like that. And it's funny because, like, sometimes when I'm playing it back for her, I'm like, I need to do something different there,
I do the
and
same thing.
uh,
I do the same exact thing.
yeah, it's so, yeah, or that part's too loud. I need to bring that down. So I'm very critical with myself when I'm playing back music for people. I don't like to do it very often because I feel like it's not done yet. But what was your other question in that's tied to that? I'm sorry.
That's okay. The question is like, so like when you're recording, how do you know when to stop? Like, when do you know that this song is done? Like, or do you have to force yourself to be like, okay, I got to stop working on this, or I'm going to beat it to death, or make it sound bad? Like, have you done that before?
I Yeah, I'm pretty good with stopping myself and going, you know what, I could make this song 10 minutes long. And it's pretty good at 3.5,
Mhm.
and it's just better just to leave it the way it is. So I'm pretty good at making the decision to just stop. I'm not that much a perfectionist. I could be, but I prefer saying a lot in a very little tiny space. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll have a song that I wrote 5 years ago, and I'll bring it back and go, oh, that's pretty cool. And then all of a sudden I have all these new ideas for it. And now the song is done.
Yes.
After 5 years later, it's finally done.
I've got a file on my computer as well. It's just like stuff I've shelved, and I'm like, I come back to every once. I'm like, okay, I like it. Now I add a little something to it. I'll shelve it again. I'll come back. I'll do that a lot, and then eventually it'll get to a point where it's like, man, it sounds decent now. Like, but sometimes I've gone off the deep end and over recorded a song, where it's just like, now I don't know what to take out because I like this and this doesn't work without that anymore. And now I made too much of a song. So, it's like cooking. You can always add, but you can't take away, but I guess in a mix, at least modern day, techniques, we can just pull a fader down and take it out the mix and it was never there. But in my mind, when I record, I'm recording for a purpose. Like, okay, this sounds good here, but then like you said, when you hear it back, it's like, shouldn't have put that there, or maybe I could take that down, or why is it even, it's just a waste. 2 minutes will do, and 5 isn't. A lot of that stuff happens to me as well as musicians. So I think that's a very common thing with, especially when we have the comfort and luxury of recording at home, you know. Um, what,
Exa-
what are
oh,
you
go ahead.
using to record on currently? What's your setup and your technique?
That's funny that you asked. I revamped my whole system, um, and I actually kind of dumbed it down. And honestly, for a while there, so like during like albums like Opium Head and Moonmoth mixes when I was recording, I actually got a little bit too comfortable with the digital editing and using a lot of samples. So
Hmm.
honestly, it kind of like made me lazy in playing live percussion. So like you'll hear stuff like Sleeping Sober, and I'm like, I don't care what people think. I use mostly samples. So a lot of that stuff was like tabla samples that I would like reconstruct in the editor and make them completely different than what they sounded like.
Hmm.
um so hardly any of that stuff was actually live. And I got lazy. I got lazy. I also got back to my electronic roots too. So I wanted to do more electronic. But now looking at all that and looking back at all the electronic stuff that I got into, since probably, God, Valdalna. And I'm realizing, I need to like do something completely different.
Hmm.
So I got rid of my Pro Tools. I got rid of all that stuff, and I bought a Tascam digital 24-track SD board. Just
Wow.
one of those $400.
No, you really
No,
did.
there's no. It's not a. Yeah,
You
it's
turned it
not a
back. You just,
computer.
that's great. No, continue, please.
Yeah, it's not a computer. It's just like a 24-track. And you record directly into it. There's no computer screen. There's no like editing it on the fly. And I wanted to do something back to the old days, like when I had a Tascam 8-track cassette recorder back in the like mid 90s, or early or late 80s, but I wanted to do something more organic and get back to my rhythmic roots. So I used that. And and I do have like a PreSonus Studio 5 professional program that I throw all the audio in.
Mhm.
And and I know a lot of people say, oh, you just need to buy a DAW, and just import that through your computer. But I said, you know what, I've one of the reasons why I got lazy was because I hate the latency. The latency on the computers really pisses me off. And the 24-track, there's no
Nope.
latency. It's what you put in is what you get. So I wanted to keep that, and I record on that, and then I transfer all the WAV files over onto the Studio 5 or the Studio 1. And work in there. That's how I do it.
I'm getting excited.
I it's the poor man's version, dude, and it's actually kind of rewarding because it's like I sit there and I construct the song and the parts and what instruments I'm playing, and I just plug in a mic, hit the record, and go.
Yeah.
And it's rewarding for me. It feels so rewarding for me.
Jack White he's one of my favorite musicians growing up as a kid, so the White Stripes at least. Um,
Hmm.
he has a great quote that says, like limitations forces creativity. So like when you take away all these options, like if you've got 10,000 ingredients to make a song, you're probably going to want to try and use all of them, right? But if you've only got 5 ingredients to make a song, it forces you to really think outside the box on how to make these 5 things sound really different and unique. Not that I'm saying you're going to use 5 drums or whatever, but I'm just saying that the limitation you're forcing on yourself is going to make, in my opinion, probably a much crazier, better product than you could have ever imagined before you even started. Because I've seen that happen time and time again. And I love that idea of just like stripping it down and saying, all right, I got a little too comfortable and let's get back to the roots here. And honestly, I got to say, like, your first 3 albums are probably the ones that blow my mind the most. You do have a lot of digital sampling and crazy, techno trancey stuff in there and a lot of those songs, but they're really grounded and rooted in the drums mostly.
Hmm.
And I personally love all your music. Is there a song or album that you like the most, and maybe a song or an album that you're like, needed more work, or maybe, or is there songs or albums that people say to you like, hey, this was my favorite, and this one I don't like? How does that work?
Oh yeah, I mean I get people telling me that certain songs are their favorite, but I don't. It's part of, for me it's like I make it for myself, and my opinions just don't really matter because it's what the person takes from the song that matters. I mean, it might not be my favorite song on the album. I mean, it's good enough to be on the album, so I do like the song,
Mhm.
but if it's their favorite, that's the most important thing to me, is that somebody takes something from the album and feels like it's saying something to them. That's more important to me than my own like view on what the albums, uh if they're going to be popular or not. For me, I think like, oh gosh, you know I mean, Opium Head is one of my favorites. The Ruin of Ghosts is one of my favorites. The Thorn Campaign are like one of my favorite albums. I feel like I really like hit the mark on those albums, even though they were probably some of my laziest as far as recording live drumming.
Okay.
But musically, production wise, arrangement wise, I felt like I hit the mark on that. And so those are like probably my favorite. As far as like the older, more Arabic sounding ones, Nagari is probably my favorite, more organic sounding Solace album.
Okay. Interesting. That's very interesting. I would have to say my personal favorite is Satya. Just because
Satya.
Satya, sorry, because
No, that's okay.
most of those songs in there, I'm gonna have a hard time pronouncing it. The first one on that album, Darban Juth Naboli, I believe, and
Very good.
and Bharat, like halfway through
Bharat, yes.
that song especially whipped my butt on the drums. I took about a month on my electronic drums to sit there and try to learn that hi-hat beat you have on that song. I'm not sure if you're familiar with how it goes, but it's like, and just keeps repeating that.
Yes.
And it's so complex because it's fast. And I'm like trying to get the right amount of hits and everything, not overhit it, not underhit it. Oh my gosh. And like, I really do. I sit there on my drums and I try to play along to a lot of your music because it helps me as a drummer get better at drumming and try different things and follow your tempos and like, okay, he's changing it up here. Let me get ready to change it with a fill, and now I change it. So I do a lot of that as just practice, general practice. And songs like that were just like some of my favorite ones early on. Like, I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. Like, how does this not have 10 billion hits on Spotify? Like, personally, I think it should. Like your top Spotify songs, just so you know, your top 5 here. We've got Bounce, Two Gypsies,
yes,
Exiled, the original Exiled. The Exile I was talking about was the Exiled Asylum mix, the remix.
Oh yeah, yes,
that's
yes.
the one I'm referring to. Blood.
Oh.
Yeah, do you remember now the long drawn out?
Oh yeah, now I remember the bing, bang, bang, bang. Yeah,
Bam,
that was a
bam.
sample.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
That song
sorry,
gets
that
me.
was a sample.
It is incredible though, like because it's a sample that you put just the right amount of reverb on that made me question what it was for so long, and
Hmm.
that's what made me hear the song again and again and like the song more and more. So that repetitive listening, really gets you in the habit of like enjoying the song more and more. Even though the song is the sound is what caught me, the song is what kept me. So
Right. Oh,
so
cool.
it seems like people really like the album Beginner's Guide to Solace, which is great. That does have a lot of general top songs that you've done over the years. Vagrant Unity was a great one that came out right at the time I was discovering who you were as an artist, and the song what's it, Moth Eaten, is probably one of my
Yes.
favorite songs I've ever heard. Just in general,
Yeah.
as a musician, it's just beautiful. Well done. Everybody should listen to that song.
That's one of my favorites on that album, and that was actually a song that didn't make it on Ruin of Ghosts, actually, which was the prior album because I just didn't have time to finish it. So that whole album is basically Vagrant Unity is just basically like and it's a it's kind of like a tongue in cheek kind of like these are like all the songs from over the years that didn't make it on any
Hmm.
albums. So they're vagrants, they're
Yes,
they're floating
makes
around,
sense now.
floating around, not doing anything, and we're going to unify them all on one album. So basically, that's kind of like the idea behind the name of the album and the theme of what was going on there. So, yeah, that's one of my favorite songs too. That one, yeah, that one probably should have done something more with it. I actually um I actually got rid of my gear. Um some of my gear kind of crashed on me and I had to get rid of it, and so I couldn't really finish that song. So a lot of those songs are kind of rough mixes
Wow,
actually. So yeah.
could have fooled me. That's just we love that album. My wife goes to that one all the time. That first song right there, that ching 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 ching.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just every time I hear it, just like I'm in for the ride. Here we go. um, Talk to me just real quick. I want to go back over the Moon Moth mixes. We talked about that just a
Sure.
brief second. That was what really caught me. I'm You've heard of the band Meshuggah, I'm assuming.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
they're
Yes.
obviously they're right up your alley, like rhythmic all the way, and
They're freaking insane.
love
Yeah.
them. One of my favorite
Yeah.
bands. And so when I heard this album, it reminded me of their album Catch 33, which is like this start to finish album where every song kind of leads into the next one. Um,
Okay.
but yours is kind of done into like four different parts, and each part again has its own series of songs. So there's like part 1 through 4, part 1 through 5, and so on, of different names of those songs throughout the whole album. And what I liked about it is that you split them right when the beat changes. So instead of having like this typically one long continuous song where there's multiple beat changes, you do each song in its own version with a different beat as its own thing for this whole version for 5 songs, really. Brilliant. It's just like
You're
brilliant.
like, why?
I couldn't believe, because now so it's like if maybe this one's not doing it for you, like it's a little too slow and you want to be more upbeat, skip to the next one. It's more upbeat, but it's the same song. Like I couldn't believe.
Yeah.
I was just like, man, it's so brilliant. Like I can't believe you did that. So anyway, Sleeping Sober Part 5 is the one that always gets me, just because there is basically, for those of you listening and haven't heard the song, there's several variations of drums that are being used with sizes of reverbs that are different. So in recording engineering, what you want to do is you typically want to use one size reverb for the whole song because it sounds coherent together. When you start adding different size reverbs, it starts to sound kind of all over the place. It doesn't sound together anymore. But the way that it was done on this song was perfect, because you had like minimal reverb, so it was like, and then there'd be like a big explosion, and then there would be like a dry, with no reverb, just like a big slap of a thud. And in the speakers, like I had big speakers at the time, and I'm hearing this, and I'm like, I thought my speakers were gonna blow. Like it just blew my mind. I was like, it comes out like this big sizable sound, and you're thinking, okay, this
Hmm.
song sounds big, and then it just like all these like quick stops with the bass drum, and it's like it like sucks the wind out of your ears almost, and it's amazing because you don't see it coming, you don't expect it, and it continues to happen for like the last minute of that song or so. And every time that happens, I crank it as loud as it'll go because it's just
Yeah.
beautiful. When you're messing with stuff like that, are you thinking the same thing? Like, this is really gonna catch some people off guard, or are you thinking that sounds cool? What's your thought process when you go off the edge like that and you really push the limit?
It's kind of more of like that might sound cool. Sometimes it's like, hey, since this is the show for it, it was an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
It was just an experimental way to go about things. Currently, some of the newer music I've been listening to have been experimenting with stuff like that, like with dry sounds, and then all of a sudden you have this like wash of reverb, and it's just like a nice. It just seems like a nice like balance of what the song is trying to say and do. But it's mostly to experiment. It's mostly to try to just do something different or just try to hear something in a different light. And a lot of experiments don't work. A lot of times I don't kind of think of. Sometimes it's a happy accident. Sometimes I don't think about it too hard. I just oh shit, the reverb's still on that track, but well, it actually sounds good. I think I'll leave it.
Mm-hmm.
So so sometimes it's a happy accident, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's just, I'm tired and I just want to see what it sounds like. I just want to experiment and mess around, and a lot of times, it works, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, and it's intentional to get to carry. Sometimes it's intentional to carry a beat because the whole idea of that album was actually it was a drill. It was like a song, a CD full of songs for belly dancers to drill to. So they had this big long mix that changed. So they could drill one thing for this section and then change their technique for this section and then change their technique again for this section.
Oh,
So it was
okay.
basically for belly dancers. And so the editing was to make sure that the beat dropped on the one. So if a dancer wanted to use just that one single piece, they can lift it out. They can just index that one and take it out and put it into another song or combine the songs. And
Interesting.
so basically that was for that reason. And probably the reverb and the delay was intentional also, as well as to like carry a pattern of beats so the belly dancer could hear the beat carry on, and so that way she anticipates the downbeat for the next pattern.
Okay.
So that's basically kind of like, it was kind of intentional, but it ended up sounding cool too.
Well, it does sound cool. That's the thing. Like everything on that is because every song is very cool in and of itself. Just personally, that last one is my favorite, but they're all just like that's the thing. Another question I would ask you is on any of these songs where people are singing, are all these samples, or do you bring in guest musicians ever and record on there with you, whether it's singer or instrumentalist or whoever? Or is everything just you and
mostly
samples?
most of it is samples. Like, it's interesting you talk about Satya was actually a family of musicians. The father, Gopal Marathi, he was a music teacher at Riverside Community College
Okay.
in Southern California. And I can't remember how I came about him. I might have looked and searched. I don't know if computers were back then. That's how old I am. But I think I might have put like some ad up at the school, and he responded, and he brought his whole family. His daughter sang, his son played tabla, he played the harmonium and the flute. So a lot of the vocals, all the real live tabla playing, that's all real. That's all from that family that came in and helped me make that record.
Wow.
But most of the other stuff is mostly samples.
Wow. It's very much appreciated when you get real musicians in there and singing because the voices that you use in your music sometimes are just so mesmerizing and just so well placed. Man, I personally I know I can't do that. Like this is not my. I love listening to this style of music. I am probably very poor at creating this style of music because every time I hear it, I'm like, I would have never thought to put that there. I would have never thought to, like every time I hear your music, and that's why I really gravitated so much because it's stuff that I could have never even considered. A lot of music I hear nowadays, it's like, here comes the break. there it is. Here comes the fill. There it is. You know, you can kind of call it out before it ever happens. And I don't ever get that with your
Yeah.
music. It's just like it's a sharp left turn every time. It's like, and I love it. I can't get enough, you know.
Well, thanks, man. But well, do you know, one of my beliefs in music is also, especially when working with samples, because I've heard a lot of music that use samples and utilize samples, and a lot of times they will just make a song and then just throw the sample in there, and you can tell, dude. I mean, you can kind of tell. You can go, okay, that sample's like really cool, but it doesn't kind of fit. But you're just throwing it in there just so you can call your song "Go a Trance" or something
Right.
like that, you know. And I'm not trying to be like critical, because everybody has a right to like create, and I'm not trying to take away anyone's creativity, but the way that I approached it, but that was my thinking. Sorry, I'm like kind of like all over the place.
No, please
My
spill it.
thinking,
That's why we're here.
it's spilling, dude. but it's like I wanted to hear something that was more kind of organic but not so electronic, so I pursued that with Opium Head. And I actually worked the music around what the samples were doing. So the samples dictated what I would do to the song. And so I worked around in samples instead of the other way around, which is adding the sample later to a song that I already created. No, I wanted to make the sample, the beautiful sounding Indian voice, to stand out amongst what I was putting underneath it. So that was kind of like my whole technique with making Opium Head. And it's kind of like my technique with incorporating vocal samples, is to like work around the sample and see what I can come up with. I think that's why Opium Head is one of my favorites, because it just blends with everything, and everything sounds like that's where it's supposed to be. Everything sounds like it was meant to be that way, you know?
That makes sense now that you're saying that. I'm thinking back to that album, because that album, I'm not going to say it's one of my least favorites, but it's definitely like the one that is the furthest away from what I would think Solace is. So I don't come to it very often. But now that you're saying that, it's starting to make sense to me now, because I'm like, it's very sample heavy, but you're right. The samples are what's being revolved around instead of the other way around. The samples are being thrown in there as additional, you know, garnishes. It's, you know, that is the meat, you know.
Yes,
Leaves me to
exactly.
I was gonna say that leads me to another question. You did one-off project, I believe it's called The Long Decay. Is that correct? Did I read that right on the
Yeah,
website?
that was a yeah, Burden of Sleep was like a
Correct.
little side project that I was working on, inspired by ambient piano music. And for a while there, I was working on a lot of that. I'm glad that you bring that up, because that's a project that I like working on. I haven't worked on it for a while, but that's like, I just wanted to do something back to my old roots electronic. I'm a big fan of ambient. I'm a big fan of Aphex Twin. Um, a big fan of Aphex Twin. So I like kind of like how he approached the ambient music. And I mean, you could go back and listen to one of his albums that he did in the 90s, and it sounds current. You're like, this is from the 90s.
Yeah.
It sounds like it just came out like last year or something. So that's kind of like my approach to that music. I mean, it's a little bit moody, of course, and but it was just like I felt like I had to like make something that way, because I felt compelled to do it, so I did it.
I threw in one song on that playlist that I've told our listeners to go check out. It's the song "Leaving." That's in the playlist.
Yes.
So if you want to go check out Bird of Sleep, at least there's a quick link to get to that Spotify page at the very bottom of that playlist. It's song number 30. I think that song really kicks butt, because it's just, in my opinion, the one that really fits the whole theme of the album. It's everything that you talked about that the album is, but in one song. Personally, I believe that that's in that song. It's got the drums, it's got some of the softness, the piano, and it's just well done. Um, there was another question I was going to ask you, though, back relating to the evolution of your sound. So, one thing I've noticed is a theme is that themes are a thing in your albums. So, every album has its own unique like direction that it's aiming towards. So, like, I know with the album Balance, it's very Asian inspired. You know, everything's very almost Eastern, like very Asian sounding. And then you get into like the albums, Val, sorry, not Valdania. Is it Runa Ghost? I guess Runa Ghost is the long one, and there is a few songs in there that are very like trancey, but Vow is a great song. If anybody's ever, if
Yes.
you know that song, obviously you're the one who made it.
Hmm.
But yeah, Val's a great example of, like the styles changing, so it's like you've got this Eastern, tabla and darbuka and stuff from the early first album, and then it starts to change a little bit into more of the trancey stuff, and then it starts to change more like the fusion of trance and Eastern together throughout the entire album. And then you get into the Asian stuff, and then you get more back into almost, it sounds on Vagrant Unity, am I correct in assessing that it sounds like you're going a little Celtic on that one?
Oh, wow.
Personally,
You
there's some
know,
stuff in there that sounds so Celtic.
yeah, I think one of the songs is When the Shade Comes. Maybe that's one of the ones that might sound a little Celtic. Actually, that was a Rune of Ghost offshoot. And I was just experimenting with, I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones.
Mm,
So
there you
that
go.
kind of, that
There you
song
go.
kind of came from that inspiration. But no, Celtic was not at all a
Wow.
influence at all. I mean, maybe Game of Thrones for that one particular song might have been, maybe it has that kind of like waltzy Celtic-y kind of feel to it with the instrumentations, the horns and the orchestrations, and less Arabic, more like European medieval,
Mhm.
maybe. So
There you
yeah,
go.
maybe.
But the point is, you're not afraid to like try the different styles of the drumming around the world, which is really interesting, and I like that. And I think that's great because you're not limiting yourself to just one single style, And I try to explain this to my wife. The drum is the oldest instrument on the planet. We've been hitting drums since the beginning of time. Our heartbeat is a drum. So drum is the original instrument, but yet it's the one instrument that you find all over the world back when we were still separated by oceans and ice and all this stuff. And every culture had its own identity of what a drum was. So, you know, if you think about it, Asians had their drums, Europeans had their drums, South Americans had their drums, Native Americans had their drums. Everybody had their own style of what a drum was. And then we all come together, with trade and commerce worldwide. And then we all start seeing, oh, this guy has that drum. Oh, that sounds cool. And your music really kind of puts that all together. It really takes all the styles of the different drums from around the world, grabs them all, and throws them into a big mixing pot. You may not always explore every single style of the music from every inch of the world, but you're taking those drums and you're integrating them into your own style. And that's what I think is the ultimate experiment with Solace, is that you do stuff that some other bands or some other artists might stick to their comfort zone with. Okay, I got some guitar, some drums, some samples, I'm good. Maybe I'll throw a vocal in. That's where I'm comfortable. I know how to work with that and edit it. And it's great. I love artists that are like that. Excision, he's a dubstep artist that just makes just wacky dubstep songs, but it's very limited to what, like what what you're going to get when you listen to Excision. It's not going to be like something different. When I come to your albums, it's always a surprise. Like when you released an album earlier, I think this past year, we were both looking forward to, like, all right, let's put it in the car and listen to it, because we didn't know what we are going to get. We always know it's going to be different, though. We're like, here we go. And that's what I loved. So you're currently working on an album and you're going old school on it. What are your plans in that album? Could you tease anything for anybody, or is...
Yeah, I could, yeah, it's, I'm, right now I'm building. I'm in the process of building. I don't know how the songs or how the album is going to manifest yet. I'm kind of like in a mode of taking one thing at a time.
Mm,
So, but it's going to be a shit ton of percussion,
good.
and it's going to be thick, and it's going to be rhythmic, really a lot of strange time meters thrown together, layering. I love layering. I love working with playing the same instrument twice and then panning hard left and
Mm,
hard right to get a very wide spectrum of stereo sound and dynamic. So it's going to be very dynamic. It's going to be very rhythmic and probably going to be kind of hard. It's almost, I've been listening to Ira and I just discovered them last year, and I'm kind of like, I don't really like metal that much. I mean, I like Korn, I like Mudvayne, I like those guys because I think they add an element to metal that I don't hear in a lot of metal. I want because I like melody. I'm a melody guy. I'm
Hmm.
from the '80s. I not that the '80s were all that good. There were some good things. I want to hear something that means something. And sometimes heavy, hard, it just doesn't do anything for me. So when I hear a metal band that's using like rhythm, melody, um, and there's a certain amount of dynamic in there, I'm all about that. That's why I like Gojira. They use all of that stuff, and you'll hear it on the new stuff because I've been listening to a lot of them, and you're gonna hear a lot of that. And I don't have like a date of release. I don't know what's going on yet, but for right now, I'm just working on percussion. But you're gonna hear the Gojira with the odd time meters and the like 90-degree turns out of nowhere. You're gonna be hearing some of that.
Excellent. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I always love coming back to your music because no matter what my mood is, good, bad, and indifferent, like I put your music on and I always feel just like I kind of recenter myself. Like everything kind of comes back to like a chill point with your music, and it's really great that you have that ability to just put something into a song that someone else can hear it and just have a connection to, which is really what music is all about. But I'm talking like a deep connection, like because it really like changes someone's emotion like that with your music. Just like you
Hmm.
said with heavy, you can really get into like, oh yeah, corn, just want to punch a wall, or get something done, go work out, lift some groceries, whatever it might be. It's not that way with your music because your music has like a little bit of everything, so you can kind of feel however you want. You might feel upbeat. There's songs that are upbeat. You might want to feel chill. There's songs that are chill. Um, and they're all meditative. Like it's not like you have to think about the music when you're listening to it. You just kind of go with it, and it sounds good. Is there artists or obviously you talk about Gojira and some others. Is there someone that you currently are inspired by, or who were your earlier inspirations? I should have asked this question earlier, but I mean,
No, no, that's okay. Well, I grew up in the '80s, and I honestly like. It was like really funny. I honestly didn't really get into music. I mean, I would listen to my sister's Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band,
nice.
Beatles album, the soundtrack to Star Wars, even
Wow.
the soundtrack to the animated version of Lord of the Rings back in 1977. That's an amazing soundtrack. And I know there's like uh, the guy who animated it has controversy behind him, but the music is brilliant. But a friend of mine put on Depeche Mode one day, and I'm like, what's this? And ever since then, I've been a fan of Depeche Mode, and um, you know, liked their production, wanted to mimic their production and their songwriting ability and arrangement. Even to this day, there's still a big influence on how I write and how I arrange music. Um, but later on, like throughout the years too, I would get into the 4AD bands. It's a label in England that released Cocteau Twins, Dead Can Dance, Clan of Zymox, um, the Wolfgang Press, all those bands from England, and it was very heavily influenced by English alternative music, and that American music just wasn't doing it for me. So that's where you hear the heaviness, the reverb, um, the depthness of the music. What they were producing back in the 80s and 90s is kind of like that's kind of like my go-to in production value and technique. So recently, more electronic, like one of my favorite electronic bands is Burial. He's like one of my favorite. He's like two-step garage, but different. But production-wise, hearing an interview about him saying that he had cheap equipment and a really bad music editor and just made it work is like admirable to me, that he could create something that has a unique sound that nobody has done before, which is mind blowing.
Mhm.
to me, and it's beautiful music, you know. So yeah, I mean, so those are influences, and you'll hear like with the strings of reverb, the continuation, the depthness of the reverb. That's a burial influence. You know, he'll use the reverb as an instrument and carry out a note all the way through, you know, a few measures of a song, but that note is like a drone,
Hmm.
which is very used often in Arabic and Indian music. So there's your drone going through just like Arabic music or
But it's a
Indian music. So
reverb.
that's, but it's a reverb. It's just a held out note with a thick ton of reverb,
That's
you
crazy.
know, and in itself, that's its own musical instrument playing there, you know. So yeah, it's, I think that answers the question, right?
I think so, yeah. Um, I know you don't. We're not gonna get into the belly dancing thing, but like, it seems like a lot of people that are aware of your music at least are belly dancers. Is that accurate and safe to assume?
Yes, it's totally accurate. Yes.
I think that's a shame because I think a lot of people could cover your music and make something really crazy out of it. At least certain songs that you have on your discography. There's just like I would love to hear as a different style. Like I would like to hear this as a rock song or as a jazz song or country song or whatever, because it has like the music there, you know, and the notes. You just now you gotta speed it up or slow it down and change it up a little bit. And I don't ever see that happening because there's just, you know, people don't gravitate towards that type of music, unfortunately. It seems like everything is with pop or with lyrics and, you know, quick and concise, 3 to 4 minutes long. I think that Spotify has helped immensely with people to broaden their taste a little bit more. And I hope that they broaden their taste more because there's a lot of crazy music out there. And something that I think your music touches on, like I said, is that you're constantly exploring styles and you're constantly trying techniques within your recording styles. You've got all these inspirations and you've got this amazing ear for knowing what will work and what won't work. I can't hardly think of a song that you've got out there that doesn't just work in some way, even um, the one that's mostly sample based. I mean, you're gonna have people that come by and it's like, oh yeah, I want to belly dance to this, and I see that people post belly dancing songs on like that, but I'm like, there's something more to this guy's music you guys are not touching on. Like, you know, it's a rhythmic paradise. You know, a lot of times that people like Meshuggah and Gojira and Animals as Leaders, bands that really change the way you hear a song. I love those types of bands and that type of music. And I always try to push that on other people. Like, hey, have you heard this? You heard that? Because
Yeah.
here's the funny story that I'll tell you. So when I was living in Los Angeles, I was driving Lyft after I left my full time job at Pure Imagination Studios. So I went back to driving Lyft and doing freelance work as a sound engineer. And one time I had a few customers in the back of the Corolla. We're driving through town in LA, and it was a Friday night drinking night. So and we had some music on. I had I forget who it was. I had something that was not you or what I normally like. And the girl in the back, she's like, "Can we change the music? Can we put my phone on?" I was like, looked at the map, and they're only going like a mile up the road. I'm like, I can't honestly. Yeah, you know, we're gonna be done with this ride before you know it, darling. Just sit back and relax. So can you put something else on? Sure. What would you like? Do you have Drake? We're not gonna listen to Drake in my car, you know. And I was like, I said, I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I can't. I got a long night of driving. I'm not putting that on. And she's like, well, what would you listen to? I was like, I would rather listen to this. And I put my phone over and tapped on, and it was one of your songs. I just hit shuffle of my normal, like, I have a liked playlist. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, Solace, you'll like this. And I turned it up, and she's listening to it. She's like, it sounds like jungle music. And I was like, oh my God. It was a drumming song, you know? So I feel like that's the notion that people have at first, when they hear something that's different or like something like your music or, you know, they hear it and they immediately go to like their childhood reference of what that music's supposed to represent, I guess, and they don't give it a chance. And I'm not saying you have to be a musician or an engineer to give music a chance, but I just wish more people would give interesting music like that a chance because it would blow their mind. It blew my mind. I had no idea who you were 3 years ago, but since then, all I can think about is like, man, I gotta ask this guy some questions because his music style makes me ask a lot of questions when I'm listening to it. And what do you feel like when you're putting out music? And I know it's for you and you know, you put out music for yourself. I do the same thing. But you got to think in the back of your mind, this person, What are they really thinking? Do you ask people their opinions? Do people give you feedback? Has feedback ever been negative? How did you handle it?
Um, I don't usually like try to meet people's approval too much. I kind of put it out, and whatever happens happens. I mean, I try to market as much as I can. I want people to like it. I want people to listen to it. I mean, my stepdaughter likes my music, and she likes Drake. you know
Mhm.
but she kind of grew up with it, so she understands it. She sees me playing drums. She hears the rhythms. Sometimes she'll be playing drum on the table, and I'm like, that's kind of cool. That's almost like a 5-beat rhythm. And so it's like, she was kind of brought up with that, so she understands it. But people who don't, it's their opinion. I'm not here to change the world. I just, I want people to like my music. I would hope that people would reach out and look for other things, because I do. I go on Spotify, I go on iTunes and go, what does this sound like? What does this sound like? Just to hear it. Because I mean, when you were when I was growing up, you'd go to a record store and you shift through the records. This album cover looks cool. I'm gonna buy it and take it home. And you're like, you'll never know what you're gonna get. And that's how I kind of like discovered music. Me and my friend would experiment and go to record stores in Los Angeles and Ontario, and go to Bleecker Bob's in Los Angeles and see what we could find in there that was cool and looked like a good album. Oh, this band's on 4AD. Maybe they're good.
Right.
Um, so and so that's how like I discovered music. Music nowadays is handed to you. Here you go. This is what we want you to listen to.
Mhm.
The record labels are handing us to you on a silver platter. In my day, it was, you had to go and find it. You had to go and discover it, and you were lucky enough to. And it was even harder for us because we liked the English music better, so we couldn't even find albums that we heard of. We had to go to the import sections and pay an extra $5 for the import. So we were always looking for new stuff and experimenting. But nowadays, music is just handed to people, and so there's no reason for them to go and look. And with the onset of phones and tablets, everyone's kind of, sorry to say, lazy,
Yeah.
and looking and exploring. So
Well,
there's no room to explore because it's all shoved in your face, like right away. Here's another group. And a lot of the music that's coming out, it sounds exactly like other bands and other musics. And I know that record labels do that to monetize and build their libraries and make a lot of money. So you get a lot of similar sounding bands and performers. But yeah, I would hope people would go out and experiment and listen. And we tried, Burden of Sleep was like, I can't get anybody to listen to that. I can't even get belly dancers or my own fan base in belly dancing and world music to listen to that. They won't even touch it. And it's really interesting what people are expecting, but because I'm attached to it, they think it should sound like Solace.
mm,
So but yeah, and as far as like reviews and I mean, I've had people, when I would like sell my music at belly dancing events, they said, I don't really like this album. This is their worst album. Like, and I'm the guy selling it.
oh,
They don't even realize they're talking to the guy. And I'm like, well, you might like this one, or what kind of styles do you like? I don't take it personally.
yeah.
I really don't. It's everybody has a taste. Everyone has flavor. Everyone knows what they like. I know what I like.
Mhm.
And sometimes I'm wrong, and I'll go, well, that is actually pretty good, but I don't take it personally. I just try to, you know, I just do what I do, and I put it out, and I like what I do. Hope you like it too.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
not, you don't have to listen to it. So I'm pretty open about what people's opinions. It doesn't really bother me too much.
Good. Your music turned me on to another great drummer. Do you know who Rocky or Rockwhy?
Yeah,
Forget.
Rocky. Yeah,
Yes. Unbelievable.
Danziger. I think.
Danzinger, yes. She is an
Yeah.
incredible drummer as well. Like, oh my gosh. Like she does this flicking technique with like her 3 fingers. She'll like flick the.
Yes.
I never seen anybody do it so fast and clean. Like she's like, "Brah, brah, brah." I'm like,
the snap roll.
Holy cow, she's clean at that. Um,
Yeah, she's an amazing drummer.
do you ever think about doing collaborations with other drummers like that that also have their own, kind of music? Because she's got her own CD, she's got her own set of Spotify stuff as well, and it's very rooted in drumming, like almost all drumming. So there's not a lot of stuff that kind of branches out like yours. But have you ever thought of like having other darbuka or other guest musicians more involved with some of your other songs? I can't, at least on your Spotify playlist here, I can't see of any like featuring this artist on your songs. So is there besides your earlier first album that you mentioned that you had a family in on, since then has there been any other guest musicians or a thought of adding some on your upcoming work?
On Nagari, uh, Ruben Van Rompuy plays almost all the percussion on that album. So yes, he's plays the percussion. Tim Rayborn plays some stringed instruments and flutes also on that record. And I had actually, you know what? Satya isn't the only album I use live vocals. Balance and Nagari all had a singer. Her name was Kate St. Pierre,
Mm-hmm.
and she sang on those two albums,
Okay.
Balance and Nagari. So I did have other musicians. So I wanted to do like with Nagari, I wanted to do something more organic and less electronic. So that's why I wanted to get in other musicians to lend their talent and voice to what I was doing. So basically they played along to the synthesizers and keyboards that I played, and then I exchanged the electronic sounds with their organic sounds, and that's how that album came about.
Okay. So is there currently plans on the new album to have, or are you just going to make this one all about, I got to get back to my roots on this one?
Might be all drum.
Okay. Cool.
It might be all drum. I'm not exactly sure yet. I'm still kind of like still in
the early stages.
I don't feel like I'm still in the early stages. I mean, I honestly have about like 15 rhythm compositions done, but I just don't know what I'm doing yet.
Okay.
So I might release an EP. I might just release one song. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to manifest yet.
Okay. One more thing I wanted to ask you about was your album covers. Because a second ago, you kind of touched on that when you were back looking in record stores. I used to do the same thing. There was a place called Vinyl Fever I used to go to all the time. Of course, Sam Goody as well, but mostly Vinyl Fever. They're obviously no longer around, but it was just giant. I don't think any of them are around anymore. It was this giant.
I don't think so. Yeah.
It was a giant record store, and yeah, I used to go in there all the time and flip through the CDs. I didn't have a record player at the time, so I just looked through the CDs and stuff, and I found all kinds of great music through doing that. Yngwie Malmsteen being one of them. So when I look at your album covers, I have it up here on my computer screen. I'm just looking. Wow, like really, if I would have saw this, in a record store, just any of these, I would have been like, okay, there's got to be something interesting on this, because this is a beautiful cover. And all your covers, you lean towards that like beauty. It's almost always a woman on there. Actually, it is always a woman on there. And it's an artistic pose typically. The Gathering season not, because it's 4 arms, but from then on, it's you got a very artistic pose. Who does the album covers, and what's the thought process behind those? Are you trying to match what it's going to go for on the actual album? Because I know like Balance, it's an Asian theme, and you have an Asian theme woman on the cover, so it's kind of to be expected.
Balancing.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So, but like, what's your process going into doing the actual shot for the covers? Because I've seen some of the stuff from Moon Moth on your Facebook page. I guess we guys are doing the shoot for that one.
Yeah, we had redid the album cover for that, and I wanted to make it more moon mothy themed.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the original cover was blue, but we wanted to kind of go more, I don't know, more fantasy like, more based on the theme of the album, which was the moon moth. I know the moon moth thing just kind of stuck with me, and I kind of wanted to just kind of like make more the imagery of that to match the name of the album too. So for example, like for Satya, Satya means truth. So if you notice on the album cover, the dancer is in a traditional Indian um, outfit, and she's looking at a bowl that has water in it,
Yes.
and the bowl and the water is the mirror looking back at her. So basically, that's kind of like the theme of that, is that the mirror is looking back at you. That's what you see is who you are. That's the truth.
Okay.
You know, that's your truth, is your reflection looking back at you. So that's like the theme of that album.
Gotcha. Okay. Um.
And Darbin Juth Naboli means the truth never lies.
Ah.
That's what it translates into. So
Personally, I think that is like the most quintessential Solace song there is. That song.
wow.
Every time I come to that song, it's like that represents everything your music's about, because it has a little bit of the samples in there. It's got a lot of drumming. It's got the female singing. It's got a male singing. You know, it's everything. Everything is in that song. It's got time signature changes. I think everything you've ever done is kind of wrapped up into that one song in some way or another, and then it just spreads out from there, of course. But I think that's why I put that one at the very top of the playlist that I created, like my selected solo
Mhm.
songs, because I think that's the one everybody should kind of start with. If that song doesn't catch you right off the bat, it's going to be hard to catch you with anything else, because that one really covers a lot of ground on Solace. Not to say that somebody might dislike that one and like another one, they might, but I think that one really has a best representation of everything that you've covered so far.
Wow. Okay, cool. Yeah, see, I don't hear any of that. Nobody tells me anything. You know, I don't hear what other people like think. So that's actually kind of cool to hear that, how you know, that you actually listen to what's going on in the music, and, you know, take it apart and have a thought behind it. So I appreciate that.
Oh, I definitely do. Everything that I tend to go out and listen to, like especially once it catches my ears, I almost want to like learn the song backwards. Like I don't want to like necessarily want to learn how to play the song always, or you know, go play on the drums or whatever, but I will always sit there in my mind and be like, okay, what is going on here? Like I'll break it down. I'll be like, I'll separate out the parts. Like, okay, let me separate out the bass. Let me separate out the drums. Let me separate out if there's guitars or vocals. And I'll try to start thinking about it independently. And then I'll start thinking about how they stacked it together. I'll start thinking about how they mixed it all together and what was the thought process behind that. Because recording it and mixing it, as you know, are two completely different things.
Two totally different
Oh
animals.
my gosh. And especially like once you're done
Master.
go ahead.
Okay, mastering is also a completely different animal.
I've done very little mastering in my career so far, and I'm not a mastering engineer, but what's your experience been on that?
Oh
Because you got a lot
God,
of different
always
platforms you've
have
gone to.
yeah, always have somebody else master it, because when you're trying to master it, it is you're kind of um limited to what you think it needs.
Right.
So I always have a very professional mastering guy take care of my stuff, because he'll hear stuff that I don't even hear, and he's like, here, this was what's going on, we'll accentuate this, or we'll bring this back. And and it always ends up being 10 times better than what I could possibly do. So I let somebody else master it, because they're outside of what I'm doing. They're not attached to, you know, what I just did. So I always have somebody else master it. Mixing it, I like having control over my mix, because there's certain voices that need to be louder in certain parts. And, you know, thank God for automation, because if I was doing that now, I'd have to be playing around with like 40 different channels,
Right.
and that would be a nightmare.
Well, here
So
I got my fader behind my computer. I'm always constantly having to pull up and
there
down
you
channels when
go.
I'm working. Like I like to do it in real time. Automation does help, but sometimes I like to just kind of have a finger on things.
Yeah.
But no, I totally relate to that. Yeah, recording it is a challenge. When you record something, and that is so I like to really wrap it up into the recording thing, because that's where it kind of always comes back to. When you're
Yeah.
when you're starting in the recording process of this, you've got an idea for a song. You said you like lay out kind of like the skeleton and the framework of what you're gonna kind of go for. What's like typically the
Hmm.
first thing you're gonna grab as an instrument? And do you play? I'm assuming you play to a metronome or a click track of some sort to keep your timing.
Yes. Yes. So basically, a lot of times I'll grab a frame drum, because the frame drums are hanging on my wall, and I don't have to unpack I'm anal about protecting my drums and their ornate inlays.
Oh yeah,
So
oh
I
yeah.
don't want to tip them. So I'll grab a frame drum, play it, write the pattern down, grab my R8 drum machine, build the patterns, build the time meters and the signatures and the tempo changes in the drum machine. Um, Lay the drum machine down on my 24 track Tascam, and that's my click track.
Okay.
Is the actual entire song that I just write out on my rhythm machine. Um, and that's what I use for my click track. And then I build on top of that. And yeah, the frame drum is the first instrument I grab because I can just easily play that, and then I can write down the pattern musically or on my drum machine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you go from the recording process to the mix process, that's when your real experiments quite literally begin, because that's when you start pushing, okay, now let me add this, let me add that, let me add this. Is that how you go about it with the mixing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Sometimes I have to live with it for a while. Like, you know, you put it away, bring it back and go, okay, yes. Okay, let's add this. Yeah, that's when the real experimenting and risk taking that happens is in the editing process.
Well, risk well taken, because so far it's always done me well on my ears. So, is there an instrument that's not per se an instrument, more of an object that you recorded that got put into a song?
Yeah, I used a bird cage one time.
Really? Okay. Tell me
Yeah,
this.
I used the first song on no, it's the second song on Nagari. It's the title track to Nagari, and it's I just kind of like the way that it sounded. I wanted to have a monotonous sounding high end sound, and I just got a drumstick and hit it, and I'm like, you know, I'm just going to record it and see what happens. So I recorded the pattern, and it's a bird cage.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I
interesting.
mean, I'll use car keys. I'll use, um, you know, so you have finger cymbals that you play together.
My
Sometimes
wife has a pair.
what I, yeah, yeah. So instead of like clanking them together, you put them together and you rub them like a
Okay.
pattern. You know, it's a pattern instead of an actual like ding ding. It's an actual almost kind of like a shaker in a
Gotcha.
way, but more
More
metallic
grindy
sounding.
kind of, yeah, slidey.
Yeah, so you kind of take existing, I mean, you can make an existing instrument, you can use it in a way that normally is not used
Right.
and come up with something different. Yeah.
I started off with pots and pans, which my mom was not very fond of because I left a lot of dings in the bottom of the pan. You know, she hated that. So sorry, mom. Um, that's how I started, was just literally pulling out the pots and pans in the kitchen and just ladles and spoons and just whacking them, because I wanted to play drums that bad. Like, I always wanted to play drums. So even at, school on my desk, I'd be sitting there, on my hands, driving my teachers nuts. And I was always inspired by other kids that were better than me that could do that. The hand beating on the desks. They had like a pen or a pencil, and they had like the high hand. I'm like, oh, you guys are so good.
Yeah.
So
It's all jazz style
oh man, they're
like
so
that,
good.
you know?
So I was always kind of in that mindset. And professionally, I'm mostly a sound designer. That's what I did professionally in my other job. And I really like the idea of always taking things that aren't intended to be instruments and turning them into an instrument somehow. And it's easier to do it with rhythm things or percussive things, because you can always just slap something or kind of shake it a few times and get a rhythm out of it. You
Hmm.
can't necessarily make everything sound like a guitar, or kind of ambient and plucky or whatever. But yeah, almost anything can be turned into a percussive object, which is why I brought that question up, because in my own music, style, I've never actually done that, which drives me crazy, because for a guy that does sound design, all I do is use real instruments. I've never actually departed that and actually taken sound design elements and put it into my song. So it's cool to hear you use a bird cage of all things in one of yours. That's really interesting.
You know, my suggestion, if you want to use pots and pans again, try a jazz brush instead of a
Mm,
instead of a drumstick.
yeah, or the ladles, which is what I was using.
Use a ladle, yeah.
Oh man. So I wanted to leave you with this one last thing on the sound experiments, and I have a question here. Oh boy, where is it? I apologize. This is why we hold for editing.
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, there it is. Um, what is okay? So these are gonna be rapid fire. These are like kind of like no right or wrong answer, but we do this for everybody that comes on. So we did this with
Sure.
Sean Rubin in the last one. What's your favorite microphone?
It is the Shure, not the Shure, the Rhodes NT8.
Okay, so the Rode NT.
Yeah, it's like a condenser mic. It picks up everything.
Perfect. Uh, your favorite drum? I think we talked about that already, or because I was gonna say favorite instrument. Um, what was your least favorite song? And I think we touched that on before. But what was? Is there one that you go back to that's like every time you hear it, you're like, I should have added that, should have changed this.
Yeah, it's a song off of Gorgon Days. It's called Blind in One Eye.
Every time you hear that one, it gets you a
I
little bit.
fucking hate it.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
I don't know why I released it, and it's really funny because some people really like it, and I'm like, it's such a stupid song. I was trying to do something Balkan sounding, and it didn't come out right.
All right, we're gonna put that Blind in One Eye into the Sound Experiments podcast playlist there. If you guys want to go check that one out, go ahead and let
Oh
us know your
God.
opinions on that later.
Go ahead. It's fine.
The worst they could say is that they didn't like it. The best they could say is, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What was your favorite concert you ever went to?
Depeche Mode, 1987 for the Black Celebration tour.
Ooh, okay. What was the worst concert you ever
Yeah.
went to?
Worst concert I ever been to. I don't know if I've ever had a bad experience. Clan of Zymox at the Palladium in Los Angeles. I almost got into a fight with somebody because he kept rubbing up on my crotch,
Oh boy.
and it was a guy, and it was kind of gross. So, and I need him, and he turned around, and we almost got into a fight. And then he claimed, "Well, I know the lead singer to Clan of Zymox. You should come hang out with us after." And I'm like, "No, I'm not."
Good.
So he just left.
What's your favorite?
Yeah, you can't fool me, bro.
Yeah, no. What is your all-time favorite album? The one you
Oh,
got to put
God.
in anytime it's like, Desert Island. What's the one you're bringing with you?
Oh my God, dude. That's not a quick fire succession. You're not going to get that with me on that one.
Maybe like top three off your head.
I'm just going to go with Black Celebration by Depeche Mode.
Okay.
That's my favorite Depeche Mode album.
I had a lot of Depeche Mode college instructor, or big fans of Depeche Mode that are college instructors. They're gonna love this if they hear it. What's the weirdest album you ever heard?
It was an album by Graham Revell. It's called Insects, and he made music out of insect sounds.
Wow. Okay.
I don't.
Weird.
It's only. I tried to find it on CD. I have it on vinyl. I don't think it exists digitally.
Interesting. Okay, that's one for the books myself.
Yeah.
This is a good one that's a bit more in the sound realm. What's the weirdest sounding movie you ever heard, or maybe this is the weirdest movie you ever heard? This one,
weirdest movie.
Yeah, typically this one's reserved for people that work in movies, but I always like to ask it to everybody anyway, just because I want to know, like, maybe you saw a movie that's just like, wow, made you think differently.
God. Wow, I don't know. Weirdest movie. I never really actually thought about. Sometimes when I'm watching a movie, I actually hear other music playing in my head.
Mm-hmm.
But it might have been maybe Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay, yeah, that's up there. I will not disagree with that one.
Oh my God.
When do you actually get that like inspiration from out of random, and then do you have to like go and immediately like record it and like get it down, and because it's like inspiration hits out of nowhere sometimes. Do you have that ability, or do you pull out your phone and just like boo cha boo boo cha boo?
Yes, I do that. I'm a UPS driver. I work for UPS because the music business isn't paying the bills.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, so I'll take my phone out and I'll hit record on the video and just start boom, da, chaka, boom, doom, doom. I'll start like doing that. So yes, I do that all the time, and thank God, because I'll get home and I'm like, I don't even remember what I just did. Oh, thankfully I recorded it. Right. So yeah, all the time.
What's been the funnest moment in your career so far?
I would have to probably say working with my current wife has been the funnest so far. We are on the same page. She is a very talented belly dancer, but she's also highly intelligent, smart, caring, understanding. We play live together often, and we practice together. I would say that's the most exciting. That's I found somebody that I can connect with and work with, and there's no ego. There's only openness and connectedness, and that's this is the best ride so far. Yeah, is with my current wife.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I don't have any other
Her name's Lindsay. Her name's Lindsay, by the way.
Lindsay.
So
All right.
yeah, she's the best.
Well, Lindsay is an excellent supporter of you and your music, and I gotta say it really shows because it comes out the other side just beautiful. So excellent. Bravo to her, everybody, for supporting this man and his
Yeah,
crazy adventures because music is not easy.
Yeah, she is my muse, and I throw a lot of ideas at her, and she throws a lot of ideas at me, and we work really well together, and it's the best. It's the best I've had.
That's great. And the last question, which should be the first question, and I make it the last question on purpose. What
Okay.
was it that inspired you to do music?
Um. Well, that might take a little bit longer. So,
We
I
got time.
when I
This
was
is
a
the
kid.
last question. I got one more thing for you, and that's
Okay.
it. So go ahead, spill it.
When I was growing up, I used to stutter, and I had a really bad stuttering problem. So I was always afraid to speak up. So I never really talked very much. And when I did, I stuttered. So it was kind of embarrassing, and it got made fun of a lot in school. And um, so I discovered music. I was like, well, listen to all of these sounds. That kind of helped me to escape, what was going on in my real life and everything. So when I started getting more into music and more interested into certain bands like Depeche Mode, they kind of inspired me to be a musician. And so I pursued, you know, playing with keyboards, learning kind of, basic piano technique, and I realized that this is my voice now. It's not my actual voice because back then I couldn't speak. I stuttered. So music became my voice, and it still is. It still is my voice. It still is that how I project what I want to say, even though other people will decipher it differently, which is totally fine. But for me, it's just my way of having a voice that I can still speak and express what I'm feeling. So I do it to express my feelings. I do it because I love creating and editing and telling a story with my music. And so I have a passion for that, and have a passion for people getting something from it too. It makes me feel good to see people getting something from it, and so it does many things, but mostly a voice for myself.
Excellent. Yeah, I can relate a little bit. I had a speech impediment when I was a kid. I couldn't pronounce the letter R, and I still have a problem.
Me too. I had that problem
Oh,
too. I
cool.
had R's and I stuttered.
I couldn't for the longest time. I think I was 8 until I could say the letter R. Like getting up there in age, and yeah, I was horribly bullied. So yeah, I can relate. To that whole misfit, not fitting in because you're somewhat different, and then music was my outlet as well, and that's all I really have as well. So when I see someone's reaction to something I've done, that's typically what gets me really excited. Like I love what I do and I love making music and sound, but when I see somebody's reaction and it's positive, even if it's negative, I just like to see somebody's reaction to what I did. It
Hmm.
makes me feel better. It makes me feel like, see, now they understand me more because I did that and they liked it. So they like
Yes,
me. It feels like that.
exactly.
Yeah, it's excellent. So it's good to hear that, man. I'm glad you shared that with us and everybody else out there because, a lot of times I think people like to brush that under the rug like, oh, I just always wanted to be a musician, and they don't want to tell us everything else. So thank you. That's really awesome for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah.
The last thing I want to touch on is you really, we've already touched on you a lot, but we really touch some more on where people can find you and your music. So tell us everything on Solace and where they can find Solace music and what you're going to be doing later this year, COVID provided, if you got any performances or anything else like that coming up.
Well, let's see. Musically, you can find me on Bandcamp. I'm all over. You can find all my titles on Bandcamp. You can find it on Spotify. Of course, iTunes, iMusic. Gosh, I'm on almost every streaming service that you can think of. So if you put a search in, you'll probably find me all over the place. But mostly like iTunes, Bandcamp, CD Baby. CD Babies has been good at getting my music out there to a lot of the streaming services. They're like a third party, but you can also, I don't know if you can purchase my music there anymore. They might only carry my music digitally now. A lot's changed over the years. As far as playing wise goes, I do a lot of benefits. There's an event called Casbah, and I think it's on September 5th. But sometimes they stream it, sometimes they don't. But it's benefit for people who are in need medically, or they lost their home in a fire, and we're trying to raise money for them. So we try to do a lot of those for people. But and unfortunately, because of COVID, it's kind of close to the public, unfortunately. So the sponsor might be streaming it, so I'm not exactly sure yet. I have to get more information. My wife knows all that stuff. I'm kind of like the one that's kind of working all the time, and I mean she's working all the time too, but she runs my social media for me.
Okay.
So she is always sending, hey, this guy contacted you, and I'm like, did you see this? And I'm like, no. So she's always like keeping me informed all the time, so I have to get with her on that.
That's fine. That's fine. That's okay. I really liked the way you did your Facebook page. You're constantly, I guess she's constantly uploading it, or updating it. So I always try to tag you whenever I can. My wife does too. We like to share songs. They're like, hey, I'm listening to this right now. So we always try to share that as well and keep people informed that, their music is out there and it's really interesting and people need to give it a try. So if you are,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think,
Of course.
oh, so yeah, Facebook, like you said, Spotify and Bandcamp, CD Baby, iTunes, iMusic, all those places is where you can find Solace. Solace. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
And do you post all your updates on the Facebook page mainly over what you're going to be doing, or on your website?
On mostly on the Facebook page. Yeah, the website is like a whole different animal.
Okay.
So yeah, Facebook is much easier to like manage. So if people want to look for updates, Facebook is the best place to go.
Excellent. So you're working on another album. We'll be looking forward to that, I'm sure. I would love to do this again sometime to talk about that new album whenever it's ready for release. Since you are going back to your roots, I'm going to have a lot more questions, I'm sure. We only got to touch on a few of the songs at best here, but I really wanted to get more in depth with you and your songwriting style and how that all went. And I think people got a much better view on how you do what you do. I'm hoping that everybody got that. I did for sure. I definitely can understand a lot more now of your production techniques and stuff like that and songwriting style. And it's going to make me go back now and listen to all this music again and be like, all right, now I got to think, how is he doing this? Oh yeah, he wrote, okay, now it's starting to make sense. So I'm going to be doing that to myself for the next few weeks. But
yeah, I'm curious to hear your insight on that too. So that would be kind of cool to hear your insight.
Absolutely. Like I said, when the new album comes out, I'll reach out to you again, and I'm looking forward to it. And it's been an honor. It really has been an honor to talk with you this afternoon and get a chance to speak with you and your music.
Well, thank you. I'm honored that you reached out, and I appreciate you showing interest in the music. And this was fun. Let's do it again.
Absolutely, we will. And I'll be doing some more guests here, so hopefully I get a little bit more popular and this video gets a lot of views. And please take this video and share the heck out of it wherever you'd like to. This is for you. So I'll be putting this on Spotify. It's going to be my YouTube page as well on Facebook, so everybody will be having a chance to watch it. And hopefully all your followers on Facebook will get a chance to see this too. It's been super informative. I gotta say.
Thank you. Yeah, this was fun. Had a great time, man. Thank you.
Excellent. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning into the Sound Experiments podcast. This is Jeremiah Soto over here that I've been speaking with. He is the man behind Solace. And we thank you guys so much for watching. And we'll be back next week, hopefully, with another guest, and keep it going from there. So, from Jeremiah and myself, everybody, thank you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
1 second there, Jeremiah.
Sure.